So we're here with Lisa Butler in the incredible Summary building in Adelaide, and Box Rallies fund Lisa in her incredible work in prostate cancer. Do you want to tell me really what your position is here, Lisa, and we'll go from there?
Sure. Well, it's great to have you here, James, and we are here in Summary in Adelaide. So it's a Health and Medical Research Institute, and I'm a research professor and focusing on and cancer for almost all of my career, and mostly in prostate cancer.
Yeah. Okay. Great. And so we want to get to know you a little bit more, and so we've got some questions here that can talk about how you have found yourself in this seat in this particular time. And so as you were growing up, were you always interested in science? I mean, is that something that you wanted to do from a very early outset, or did you fall into it? How did it come about?
Well, no, I did love it, actually. I loved it at school. I was quite good at it, but I also did love it. So I was always very keen on maths and on chemistry in particular. And, my goal was always to be a school teacher, actually. I really wanted to teach science to kids. And so, but as I went to university, part of training to be a teacher is to do a science degree and then teaching. But I really fell in love with research as I went through my science degree. So that led to doing an honours year, which is a year where you do a small research project. So it gives you a bit of a feel for, do I really love science, or, was that interesting, but I'll end up doing something else. But I really enjoyed that. And so that was then the stepping stone to doing a PhD. But, the reality is I still love teaching. And so luckily in my job now, I get to teach, other students to be researchers. So I still kept that passion, I think, for young people.
Nice, yeah, that's a great thing, isn't it? And the importance there of our next generation of scientists coming through and having people that they can look up to and work with, such as yourself, is such an important part of that education process. And so what would therefore be your first, would you say would probably be your first job in science?
So once I finished my PhD, which was here in Adelaide, I had the opportunity to do 3 years of what we call postdoctoral research training, which is really your first job, but you're still kind of a trainee. You're still feeling the ropes a little bit. And I had the chance to do that at a fantastic cancer hospital in New York called Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center.
Great.
And, that was an incredible life experience in general, but also just an experience in science. So to get that sort of training and expertise and bring it back to Australia is something that we're all encouraged to do, to go somewhere else, whether it's within Australia or overseas, just to broaden your perspective a little bit, bring fresh ideas and new insights.
Do you find that ends up feeding the collaborative nature of research from labs in your country, but also across the world? It
does, because it's amazing to me that I still work with and interact with a lot of the people that I did that postdoctoral training with now 25 years ago, which is really scary. It's gone very fast, but we still are in touch. We still work together a lot, and so I think that has helped build our network really well.
That's really interesting. One of the questions I was going to ask there was, how long have you been working in science and things, but 25 years since doing the postdoc. Yeah, it ends up being that whole big lifetime experience of in that particular focus. And so in here in Summary, are you a part of a team? Do you fly solo, or do you work with other people?
Yeah, so I lead a team of about 15 people, and our team is very what we call multidisciplinary, which means that we're all different types of scientists. So we have students, but we have junior researchers. We have nurses that do research with us. We have doctors who are doing research with us. So it's really an interesting mix of people, because we all bring different things to the table. So our team also, in addition to doing research, also runs a biobank in prostate cancer. And what that means is, as the name sounds like, it's a bank of samples from patients with prostate cancer. So they consent to give their specimens and information to be used in research. So that's why we have a really good link to, to the clinic as well. But, in addition to our own team, we collaborate a lot here in SAHMRI. So one of the good things about SAHMRI is that it's all different types of science. So there's people that work on metabolism, cardiovascular disease, Indigenous health and research, mental health and research. And so all of those actually can often feed off each other really well. And the setup of the building is here that, you can bump into these people all the time. So, and we have seminars together, things like that mean that we're not just in our own little bubble, we are actually interacting with a lot of other people. And I think that makes our research better because we're bringing together the best minds in each aspect. We're not trying to just be one team doing it all.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you love what you do. Is that the case? Or do you find that you have, obviously some days are better than others, but is it something that really comes through a real sort of love affair of what you're doing? It
definitely is, because I think, one of the great things about working in science is no 2 days are the same. So, sometimes you're really sort of talking with patients. We do a lot of outreach and communicating research back to patients. But then, there are also really challenging days where we're, writing grant applications or we're trying to get a paper published. And, some of those things are really hard to do. There's a lot of sort of rejections or, sometimes those can be a long path. So, so some days are more challenging than others, but then, there's always some positives in it where you see, you get a great new result or a student wins a prize or, you've trained a new PhD graduate that's now, doctor something that is, going on to do their own career. So
I think within our community, the Box Rallies community, we very much look at the cancer scientists as real rock stars, understated, underplayed rock stars.
Yes.
But, and I look at it a lot to say, you imagine being in a job where you come to work and 99% of the time it's a no when it comes down to the research, and still turning around every morning and going, this is great, we're doing some great stuff. It really is a credit to you.
But it's never boring. I think that's the thing, if you find, a result isn't what you expected, then you have to think, well, hang on, what's going on? What other aspect or angle could we be taking? What's another possibility? So I think that side of things means it's never a tedious job. And I think that's sometimes the hardest type of job, is something that's very tedious. Whereas in science, there's always something new happening.
It's not closing a door, is it? If you find something that isn't working, and it doesn't mean you haven't learned anything from it. You've learned the fact that pathway leads to a pathway that doesn't work. And so therefore you're finding another pathway.
Yep.
You mentioned before about the grant application process. How often are you writing grants?
Oh, look, we write a number of different types of grants, probably on average about 10 a year, I would say, at a minimum. And then the junior scientists in our group are also learning. So they're putting in applications for grants and fellowships that are designed for junior scientists. So they start to learn the process. And so we also help them with those. So it's a lot of work. Some of the grants are sort of just focused on your one project. Some of them are part of very big teams that might involve lots of researchers from either within Australia or overseas. So each of those has different needs, different energy levels and all of that kind of stuff. So yes.
Before you can put them through, you've got to get
a lot of meetings and chats and absolutely.
Okay, right. The type of funding that we've been able to get from Box Rallies, is that something that that particular grant application is something that you did yourself only? Yeah.
Yes, I did. Great. So it involved, our broader network in terms of collaborations, but really it's centred here on our group here at SAHMRI, and it involves a lot of the patient samples that we have collected here as well.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So what would you say is probably your most cherished achievement in your last 25 years, do you think?
Well, I think the thing that really jumps out is actually, some of the work that I did in New York was actually the work that made a drug go into the clinic for prostate cancer. So that was a super exciting thing for what we call a basic scientist, where I'm not a clinician, and so to actually see my work lead to a clinical trial was super exciting, and so that was great. But at the same time, and I think, kind of links in nicely with the project that we have funded through Box Rallies, is it was also our biggest disappointment. So, which probably sounds very strange, but it looked amazing in the lab. Everything we did with this drug looked incredible. It was killing cancer cells. It was curing mice with prostate cancer. We were so excited about it. But then in the clinic, it didn't live up to that potential. And I sort of realised afterwards from that disappointment that in fact that's the norm. So 95% of drugs that go into clinical trials don't ever get approved for clinical use. And so what I thought was our one disappointment was actually reflecting something that's going on in the whole field.
Yep.
And so part of what I've been doing ever since then actually is trying to figure out how can we better predict which drugs are going to work in patients.
Yeah.
There's obviously a missing step somewhere, and so that's why we put in a lot of our patient-derived research, because I think that's part of the missing piece at least, and trying to come up with ways to have tests where we can predict, is this a person that would respond very well, or alternatively are they not, and perhaps they'd be better off going down a path of another treatment. So in a strange sort of way, that really disappointing experience has prompted, I think, all the research we've done since then, because this is, I think, one of the biggest problems we have to overcome.
Yeah, right. So the closing of the door makes you refocus on other aspects or other directions that you can take, and looking for that 5% that does come through.
It does come through. That's right.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah. Well, this actually might lead on to the next question quite well. Where would you see yourself, or where would you like to see yourself in, say, about another 5 years?
So I think where I'd like to see us is really have a sort of a patient to bench to patient setup, so that we're actually learning a lot from the most clinically relevant information we can, which is from the patients and their samples and their medical information, taking that into the lab, and then the results of that being fed back through to the clinic. So I think that that's the way. We have to sort of supplement our more artificial systems, which we need. We still need to be able to do research on a big scale, which needs a lot of these sort of cell lines and those sorts of models in the lab. But to be able to bring it back to the patient all the time, because I think that's the important piece that we need to keep in there, because every patient is different. Every tumour is different. Every prostate tumour is different. So, we can't treat everyone the same, which is sort of essentially what we're doing most of the time now. The patient to, like the bed to the lab to the bed type thing that you were mentioning as before, I think is important to put in context with exactly where we are here in Samarie, right? We're right next to the Royal Adelaide Hospital. That's right.
And you were saying earlier that you do a lot of work directly with the hospital with patients that are there. That's right. So we have hospitals here in Adelaide. We have the pathology service here, which is incredibly important as well, because obviously any research that we do can't compromise patient care. So they're very careful about helping us, giving us samples that are not going to be needed for the patient's diagnosis, and that's incredibly important. And the amazing thing I think about Australia that we don't often realise compared to other countries is they all do this to support research. They don't need money. They don't demand anything for that or recognition. They actually, out of the goodness of their heart, the doctors, the nurses in theatre, and the pathologists all have committed to help this sort of program, which I think is incredible. That's a very profound answer. If you had some advice that you could give your younger self after the years that you've learned, what would it be? Look, to be honest, I think it's just keep your eye on the ball. Like, it's very easy as you progress through a scientific career, and I think probably lots of careers are like this, where you start out doing exactly what you love, which is being in the lab and doing the research physically with your own hands, that as you progress, you're sort of moving out and back and away. You're doing more committees, you're doing more administration, you're doing more paperwork and grant writing and things like that. It's sort of, it's good in the sense that it's benefiting from your wisdom, but it's also taking you away from the coal face of what you love. And I think, that's one thing I would, remind myself, is that it's not about necessarily ticking boxes on a CV. It's actually, just keeping the focus on the research. I think that's good advice for anybody that runs their own company.
Yes, absolutely.
Manages companies, anything like that. It's so easy to get bogged down in all the other bits and pieces. But you've got to keep focused on that coal face.
And it's hard at times, yeah.
What are your interests outside of cancer research?
So I'm a big reader, actually, so I love reading, and I read voraciously, and I think in a strange sort of way, I think that's kind of helped my science in some respects. Like when I think about writing manuscripts, writing grants, it's really about telling a story that resonates with people and they understand why this research should be done, you know, why you're doing it the way you're doing it, and what can we conclude from it. So really, it's all the same ingredients as in a good story. And so so I think that's been something that's, you know, it's definitely separate from my research, but it has benefited. But also I love, you know, I like going to the gym. I have 2 kids that are very sport mad, so I do a lot of running around to sports games on the weekends, which I really enjoy. Yes, yes. I'll be sad when that stops, actually.
So, all right, okay. A couple of fun questions. What's on your bucket list of things you'd love to do?
So, you know, I think I would like to see more of Australia, which is a strange sort of thing to say, but I think as...
You're talking to the converted. Yeah.
Exactly. You know, I mean, that's why I've always been so interested in hearing about and looking and reading about the Box Rallies, because, you know, a lot of what we do as researchers is we go to main cities, we maybe will go overseas for conferences or to visit collaborators and things like that, but I feel like we don't see enough of our own country. And so that's something I would love to do, because, you know, there aren't super... huge numbers of universities within Australia, and certainly not outside the major capital cities. So
yeah, that's right. Well, you know, come on a rally with us. We'll show you your faces. But I think that's great. You know, thank you very much for your time today. We look forward to having a little bit of walk through the lab in a minute, and seeing where some of the research is going.
Yeah, I look forward to showing you around.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.